Hey, Fletch from the Eldritch Press here. So, what is D&D? That's a tough one. Ask a dozen people, you'll get a lot of blank stares. A couple of them might give you an answer, or try. Even my wife. 20 years, 30 years, 40 years. I can't remember how long it's been. Ask her, she's going to give you a blank stare. She's not going to know what to say. A lot of people look for the answer. What is D&D? There's really no easy answer on that. But I'm going to try to pin it down in a short period of time. I've been known to talk too much. I don't get it. But I'm going to try to do this in a short manner. And try not to use my hands too much. We'll see what I can do. D&D is a game that takes place in your imagination. There can be many props that are used along the way and lots of ways of doing it, but ultimately it's a game of imagination and discovery and interaction between you and the world and you and the other players that take part of the story. It's called a role-playing game because you play the role of a character. You act in the part of this character, and you interact with the world through this character and make decisions through this character. When I say act, I don't mean act like a actress in a movie. But there are similarities. Unlike an actor that reads a script and plays the part that someone has written for them, a role-playing game is improvisational. You have the agency to make the decisions for your character. Nothing is written in stone, and you just portray your character the way you feel they will interact with their world. This can be done in the first person, the third person. It doesn't have requirements of how you interact. It just requires you to interact. When we say the world, we mean where the game takes place. It's a fantasy. It's imaginative. This world that the GM creates can be derivative of anything that they have ever read or saw on TV or experienced. This can be anywhere historical, from the Dark Ages to the Roman era to Camelot to Greece to Renaissance. It can be places that you read about or saw movies. Lord of the Rings, Game of Thrones. There are many, many settings that a game can take place in. Wherever that may be, the game master, the GM, or the DM as they're called, creates a rough story in their mind of perhaps some of the highlights that could take place in a chapter of this story. The characters go through this world in a series of game sessions or adventures, and they can have a beginning and an end to each of these quests, but the story continues without a real defined ending. What do you need to play the game? Well, all you need is a few dice, a pencil, and a piece of paper, and a couple of friends. You can get the basic rule set for free, and play forever with just those things. But ultimately, there are source books that give you more defined rules. When you're first looking to play, if you do a search, things like the SRD and OGL might come up, and they can make you scratch your head. Don't worry about these things, because they're not needed to play the game. These things are there for people who create content and wish to sell it. The SRD, System Reference Document, is a set of the rules that you can use legally to create your own game. Within that SRD, there is the OGL, Open Game License. You have to have a license and publish that with your product in order for it to be legally published. There's defined rules that you have to follow and guidelines, and that's what the SRD is there for. So to play the game at your house with your friends, you don't have to have either of those things. So don't let them confuse you. The game is intended to be played around a table. It's a tabletop role-playing game. But now, with the technology we have and Zoom conferencing and the reality of the world we live in, you can play it remotely. You can play it with a piece of software. There's much software out there. You have to learn a little bit about the software, but you can play with somebody sitting on the other side of the world, and it is almost as fulfilling. Can't have a beer with them, but you can play the game. The GM will, over time, create their world in chapters. It's in episodes, in game session. They are each self-contained, but over the course of time, they connect together to paint a story, a novel of the world you're playing in. And that can always be different because of the interaction of the players. Their interaction with this world changes the reality of it. There is agency to change your world. So every game has rules, right? Well, D&D has plenty of rules. But ultimately, you don't have to know a lot going in. You just have to want to participate. The GM will often have at least a basic understanding of the rules and what's involved. But really, rules and the guidelines of the game can be learned as the group becomes more experienced playing it together. It is not required to study a manual or to know everything, and no one knows everything. The rules have great flexibility and the ability to adjust and interpret the rules to meet the flavor of the game that everyone wants to play. Everyone's character has abilities. These abilities represent real life, real world features that we all have. Strength, dexterity, constitution, wisdom, intelligence, charisma. These are the abilities in Dungeons and Dragons. You can be very good with some abilities, or you can be not so good with some abilities. The range is expressed through 1 to 20, 10 being the exact average. For instance, if your dexterity was below 10, let's say it was 8, you're going to be pretty clumsy. You're going to have a minus to any attempts you make using dexterity. If your dexterity is, let's say, 15, you're going to be pretty agile. You're going to have bonuses to any dice rolls you make using your dexterity. You use your abilities to interact with the world and to manipulate things in this world. In addition to abilities, you have skills. There's things that you are good at and other things you don't know much about. Things like stealth, investigation, persuasion, survival, acrobatics. These are all skills that you are either strong at, weak at, or just average at. Characters can also have certain powers, like spellcasting, sneak attack, divine powers, your fighting prowess. These are all things that you can gain, and they all contribute to the makeup of your character. And you will use all of these attributes and features throughout a typical game session. One thing that every character has also is called hit points. Picture those as your life essence, your health points. You don't start out with a whole lot. When you're new to the world, you can get killed pretty easy. When you run out of hit points, you fall unconscious. If you're unconscious too long, you can die. There are a few other core mechanics that determine your character. They are things such as class and race. There's quite a few different types of races. There's cat people, there's kind of dragon people, there's kind of devil people. Then there's the more classic elf, dwarf, halflings, and humans. What race you choose to play determines certain features that you have. Each of them have a few things that are unique to their race, and they can help you develop your character and their background based on that race, but they also can help the way you interact with the world around you. Then there are classes. Your class is your job. Basically, it's what you do in your adventure, the role you play in the adventure. Fighters, rogues, clerics, wizards, barbarians, monks, they all do things differently. And you use your class skills to enhance the abilities of the party. It's collaborative in the way you approach problems. And your race and class can give you different tool sets in how to deal with situations and problems. So these are the core of your character and the core mechanic of building your character and how it interacts with the world. As time goes on and you become more experienced in the world, you learn how to deal with it, you gain experience and you gain enhancements to your powers and features. You get more health points, you get greater ability scores, you get better bonuses because you've gained experience in adventuring in the wide world. You're no longer a greenhorn, you're a veteran. You're better. Then there's the dice. Everybody loves dice. There's something about dice that people like. You throw them, you roll them, they're random, you don't know what you're going to get. It's just dice are cool, and dice are a central part of the game. There are typically 6 different kind of dice. Yup, there's a 4-sided dice, 6, 8, 10, 12, and 20-sided dice. They all have a part to play. The core mechanic is based on the D20. That's 1 through 20 on a dice. A dodecahedron. You can kind of think of that 1 through 20 as percentages. 1 is 1%. 20 is 100%. A 10 is 50%. Using that math, every point on a 20-sided dice is worth 5%. That's how the math works. Therefore, the average is 10. So if you have an ability score that's 10, you're dead average. This 20-sided dice is rolled by players and DMs alike in order to determine outcomes. There's guidelines that assign a number to how easy or difficult certain tasks or interactions are. For instance, jumping 5 feet is really not that hard. Jumping 5 feet from a standing still jump might be like a 10, right? You roll a 20-sided dice and see what number comes up. Now, jumping across that stream might take good strength. If you're not that strong, you're going to have a minus on that dice roll you make. If you are quite strong, you will have a bonus to it. If you have a skill that helps you here, which might in this case be athletics, athletics is based on strength. You would then have a bonus to that roll because you're proficient in athletics. You might get a +2 on that 20-sided dice roll you make. And if you're strong, you get an additional bonus on that dice roll, maybe another +2. So let's say I roll a 7 on that dice roll, that 20-sided dice roll. Seems like I might fail because it was a 10 assigned to the difficulty of jumping across. Not so fast. Because you have bonuses on that, a +2 from athletics and a +2 because you're strong, you get a +4. That 7 you rolled now becomes an 11. You have jumped across. You apply that mechanic, the essence of that, into everything you do. Your interaction with a merchant, your delving into the mysteries of a book, your ability to fight and attack and do damage. It's adjusted up or down and modified by certain conditions of your character, but everything is expressed on a 20-sided dice. Combat is a big part of D&D, but D&D always involves combat. There's bad guys to beat. Combat has a special assigned number called armor class. Anybody that you fight is going to have a certain level of protection. Someone with no protection, just me standing here, an average guy, has an armor class of 10. If I happen to be very agile and I have a good dexterity, that armor class can be adjusted upward because I'm able to dodge out of the way of things. But to help my dodging, I might wear armor, or I might have some magical protections that increase my armor class. The higher your armor class, the tougher the number you have to meet in order to get through those defenses to actually do damage and take away hit points. So everyone's character, and really anyone else that you interact with in the world, is going to have an AC, an armor class assigned number. The DM knows what that is. So when you're in combat, you're trying to get through someone's armor class to damage them. You roll your 20-sided dice, and if your modified number meets or exceeds your opponent's armor class, you hit them and you do damage to them. You take away hit points. Now this is where those other dice come in. So a small little dagger doesn't do as much damage as a gigantic two-handed sword. If something isn't going to do a lot of damage to you, it's going to roll a smaller dice for damage. Let's say a 1d4 or a 1d6 or a 1d8. Maybe even a 1d10 or a 1d12. Big damage. And it might even roll a couple of them. 2 4-siders or 2 6-siders. Spells cause damage. Other magical effects cause damage. Sometimes these are expressed by multiple dice. 8 6-sided dice when you blow somebody up with a fireball. Or a lightning bolt. Or a cone of cold. Or an acid spray. Or a cloud of poison. Whatever it is, you're going to know what your character's damage is by looking at the attack in question, whether that's a weapon or a spell of some sort. And rolling dice is fun. Everybody kind of likes it. All right, roll your 20-sider to hit. Oh, you hit him. Roll your damage. Boom, there goes the 4d6. And you got 15 points of damage on this guy. The DM takes the hit points off of the opponent, reducing their health, and when you drop them to 0, they are unconscious. So really, that is what D&D is. What is D&D? I just gave you my explanation. Ask people, see what they say. They'll give you another explanation. Ultimately, it is a fantastic way to enjoy time with your friends. The synergy of a group making decisions is very gratifying. Collaborating with your friends to figure out mysteries and solve problems is very rewarding. It can build camaraderie. It can teach you many real-life social skills. How to cooperate. Something that's really lacking in this world these days. How to compromise. You don't always get your way. You have to figure out how to do something even if it's somebody else's idea. You have to leverage your special abilities to help solve a problem. Lifetime memories can come from gaming. I have lifelong friends that I met through gaming that I am still friends with and still play with. It is a unique interaction with humanity. People can be hesitant to play because they don't understand what the game is, and it can't easily be explained. But you can really only get it by playing a game, by participating. This is what role-playing is, and that is why Dungeons and Dragons and every other role-playing game out there now is so popular. Because you make friends and you solve problems, and there is a never-ending story that always has another page to turn.